And we've got lots to get to today, and we're going to try and keep this in the arena of facts, but we're also going to talk about the butterfly effect. And it's a touchy subject, right? You know, the Iranian regime
Yeah.
is not a regime that's well liked around the world. They are hardline Muslim dictatorship. They have murdered tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of their own people over the last 47 years. So no love lost there. But there's a bunch of other stuff going on around this that makes what happened this morning at 8:15, which was the intentional bombing of several targets, dozens of targets in and around Iran. Maybe we just start there as to when you found out what you're hearing about what the impetus was. We kind of know what the impetus was, and just kind of the short strokes around what we know militarily about what happened in Iran last night and this morning.
Right. Well, we have been positioning forces in the region for probably months, but certainly in the last few weeks, there's been a massive buildup. You don't do something like that unless you're prepared to act. I referred to the deployment of our carrier battle groups as Chekhov's aircraft carrier. When you put an asset like that on the table, you're going to pull the trigger. And this morning,
Mm,
Donald Trump pulled the trigger. And I think the thing we have to well, let me back up for a second because no case has been made to the American people for going to war with Iran. Congress has been completely absent. The Republican controlled House and Senate have not done their duty. The media has failed utterly to ask the kinds of questions that need to be asked before committing a nation to war. And the president just delivered the longest State of the Union address in history and didn't find time to explain to the American people his rationale or what was about to happen. I mean, this is a not just a disgraceful episode in American history, it is costing lives already. And I have said from the beginning that this is going to go sideways because you cannot predict the outcome of an operation at this scale. And I was doing a live this morning, earlier this morning. I predicted that at some point we're gonna kill Iranian civilians inadvertently. We're gonna hit a school, or we're gonna hit a wedding party, as we often did in Afghanistan. And sure enough, as you just relayed to me before we went live, Dean, the body count at this girls' school is now up to what, 53? Something
53.
is going to send this operation off the rails, whether it is an incident like that, whether it is the capture and the parading of an American POW, or God help us, a KIA in the streets of Tehran. This is not going to go the way Donald Trump wants it to go. I promise you that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Ken, and you're 100% right. And just to kind of give people the short strokes, we'll get to when this whole thing started, but already the misery and the nightmare for civilians is beginning. An Israeli strike hit a girls' elementary school in Manab in Iran's. So one of the southern provinces. As of writing this, at least 53 children and staff have been confirmed dead. At least 63 others are wounded. The death toll is rising as rescuers dig through the rubble. There were 170 girls attending Saturday morning classes when these missiles hit. Now, that is going to be used, and it will play out a narrative that is going to be incredibly detrimental to Israel, the United States of America, to Trump and Netanyahu. And the civilian loss is the only thing people like me traditionally care about. However, this operation began at 8:15 in the morning, and I want to kind of give people the short strokes about what has happened. Israel and the United States planned this for months, by the way. Joint military assault, codenamed Operation Epic Fury or Operation Roaring Lion by Israel, striking targets in Tehran, Qom, Ifshan, Kershmana, Tabriz, Karaj, and Alam. Missiles hit near the Supreme Leader's Ayatollah Khomeini's house, residence, and office. They struck IGRC headquarters as well. It's believed they've taken out pretty much every tier one leader in the IGRC and the Iranian regime, and the whereabouts of the Khomeini are unknown right now. How do you think that plays out in
Well,
Iran? We're seeing competing celebrations in the streets. You're also seeing people run for their lives. We're already seeing civilian deaths. It's a complicated issue,
yeah.
really complicated.
First of all, I don't think we can any longer believe whatever is coming out of the Trump administration when they say they've hit
Mm.
certain targets, when they say they've achieved certain objectives. Wasn't it just a few months ago that we had apparently totally obliterated direct quote, totally obliterated the Iranian nuclear program. And now we're going
Mhm.
back into Iran because it turned out that wasn't true. We can no longer trust what is coming out of this administration. They lie like they breathe. The other thing that non tacticians need to understand about air power is that it doesn't force regime change. Air power never has. You need results on the ground. That usually mean boots on the ground unless you have a really robust resistance inside that country. And the Iranian regime has done an incredibly effective job at decapitating the resistance. Something like 10,000 people were murdered during the recent uprisings. Air power alone is not going to take down a regime. If our administration had any sense of history, any sense of how this is unfolded in places like Syria, where you have had regime change, as opposed to other places where we've tried this and failed. Dropping bombs does not compel a population to topple its leadership. It's never worked that way, and the childish, almost comic book approach to war that this administration has, it's just
Mm.
going to get more people killed without the results that they are promising us.
So far, those results are he wants to set the Iranian people free. That's what he said in his address last night at 1 o'clock in the morning. By the way, conducting yet another war from the ballroom of Mar-a-Lago, which isn't a skiff and it's not a situation room and it is not
Yeah.
secure. So that's another issue. But he said two things that caught my interest in a long range, rambling, very low energy, very sickly address when he said we just bombed Iran with Israel. And he said two things that I thought were really interesting. He said Americans are going to die. American servicewomen are going to die. And effectively, hey, that's war for a guy
It
who
was
drafted.
a shoulder shrug. Americans are going to die.
I want
I
your
mean,
thoughts on that.
I was not surprised, given what we know about this man's disdain for service for those in the military, for the suckers and losers that I served alongside, some of whom are buried in Arlington. Um, he doesn't understand service. He comes from a family that has never sacrificed anything. I mean, when he was asked about this on the campaign trail, when he was asked what sacrifice meant to him, he talked about building skyscrapers. So this
Yeah.
offhand shrug of the shoulders about Americans having to die for him, I think it is another glimpse into just the darkness in this man's soul, which is another piece of this that I don't think we're paying enough attention to. Sure, there are strategic objectives that have been laid out: regime change, protecting Israel and other regional allies from ballistic missiles. But I think at the heart of this is a psychic deficiency in Donald Trump's
Mm,
brain. The idea that this is the one thing he still controls. He can no longer control the narrative about the Epstein files. He can no longer control inflation. He can't even impose tariffs at will, but he can control the US military. And when you have a
mm,
toddler presidency, it shouldn't be a surprise that when it is backed into a corner, it lashes out with the only tool it feels it still has control over, which is the mightiest military machine in the history of the world. And if that doesn't
mhm.
terrify you, it should.
Yeah, and we're talking about that sacrifice he's projecting American soldiers, men and women, sons and daughters, have to make on his behalf as he tries to outrun 34% approval rating, as he tries to outrun 53 missing pages from the Epstein files that are so disgusting it makes your stomach churn, as he tries to outrun the end of whatever he is. And to that point, here are the American bases that Iran hit across the Middle East with no problem. You want to talk about that sacrifice of the Americans. Bahrain, the Fifth Fleet Command Center was hit several times, not just with ballistic missiles, but Shahed drones. And also, the Al Jafar base was hit in Qatar. They had a base hit there. Kuwait, three different bases. The UAE, three different bases. Saudi Arabia, four different bases. Jordan and Iraq, two different bases, including the U.S. base in Erbil. By my count, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 16 different installations that the United States has been hit. There we go. Denver Riggleman is in the house. Can you hear us, Den? Can you
I can
hear
hear you.
us?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you. You
Loud and
sound
clear.
good even though you're under the weather. Thank you for joining us. Just going over the targets that Iran managed to hit in response to the invasion of U.S. and Israeli forces at the behest of Iran and Netanyahu, and talking about how Donald Trump telegraphed last night in his speech that, hey, yeah, some of you are going to die. And then, as Ken pointed out, shrugged his shoulders like, hey, that's just what happens. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you know what was weird, Ken, when I watched that drone, right, hit our Bahrain base, I had, I had some thoughts about what you've
Yeah.
seen in Ukraine, and I had thoughts about what I saw in Ukraine. And, watching it, I'm like, okay, that tracks. I was just and Dean and Ken, I don't know how far you went on this when I was trying to fix my Wi-Fi. And can I tell you why my Wi-Fi was broken really quickly? Um,
Sure.
I had my Bluetooth set to my shower speaker. Anyway, so
And
we
he's
just put
listening to a little Skinnerd in the morning in the
I
shower.
yeah, that's right, yeah. They call me the breeze, right, while I'm washing my hair. But so but, I don't know how far we've gone into this. I don't know if you guys did the layer stack of why we're in Iran because, both of you are so well versed in this. But when I saw, targets being hit, US targets, I had this eerie, the saying came in my head, my old military saying that there's a fine line between leaning forward and bending over. And we have seen such incompetence in our administration and also in our military planning that I'm wondering where we're going to screw up here because we've lost so much talent, especially when you're looking at strategic targeting. So my biggest fear is that we're going to have a mass casualty event for U.S. American service members because we just aren't quite sure what we're getting into, and our decision making isn't actually being done with any type of, I would say, prescience or any type of expertise. And I think that's what I fear now. I can go into the stack of why I think we're there, stolen election conspiracy theories, Epstein files. We can go into donors. We can go into this bizarre thing where Israel has Trump by the short hairs. But again, as far as just tactically, operationally, and strategically, the three levels of warfare, my worry is that we don't have the actual, I would say, knowledge or the actual talent to see what could happen based on our actions.
Ken?
Yeah, I think we are being led by the most incompetent administration and DOD in American history. In American history, we have somebody at the helm at DOD who can't even keep Atlantic reporters off of war plan chats. We have somebody at the in the White House who is clearly exercising a deep seated psychological need to establish some control over an increasingly uncontrollable presidency, and that is a recipe for disaster. In addition, you have the rampant corruption, which is usually spoken of in economic terms, but it is going to come down to lives of Americans and Iranians at this point. I encourage everyone to just Google Polymarket Iran. Google these betting markets that spiked in literally the hours and minutes before the first bombs fell. That that is a sign of insider trading, which, is something you make movies about when it's Wall Street, but it's something that you bury people over when it's war and peace. And I don't know if we'll ever get to the bottom of it, but I would bet my life that people are making a fortune over this war, not just in terms of arms sales and the price of oil, but in literally betting on it, literally
Mm,
having insider information about when the bombs are going to fall, and people close to Trump in the White House, or at least very proximate to it, are putting massive bets on war with Iran and making a fortune off of the lives of American service members and Iranian civilian casualties. It is grotesque.
yeah, Polymarket, I believe, is owned by Peter Thiel. So, when you
Go
talk
figure.
about yeah, you talk about what Polymarket does and what they play in here. Listen, this is a part of the narrative. Is that not only does Donald Trump bet on collapsing economies, and destroying Wall Street and the stock market with tariffs and announcements of tariffs and short selling the market. Denver, to Ken's greater point, we saw a massive rush yesterday on these crypto betting markets, where you saw wallets putting in hundreds of millions of dollars that predicted the exact time the first bombs fell at 8:15 this morning.
It's
Well,
outrageous.
It is outrageous. You know, my biggest fear too is that there's going to be polymarket betting on casualty rates, which is something that when I'm looking at what's going on right now, you have people betting on how many are going to die, how long this war is going to last. If that's there, I'm speculating, but I got a feeling I'm probably close
It
to
is.
being right. Okay, thank you, Ken. So, so I think I'm pretty close to being correct. You know what's something this morning, and Dean and Ken, I've been with you guys around the world now, both of you, multiple times. And I think people need to know that we've sort of, I don't want to say we've been in the shit together because, but in some respects, we've been in the shit together. And I think that's wonderful. This morning, when Donald Trump truthed that he believed Iran was manipulating or had manipulated the 2020 elections, I felt like almost this bizarre prophetic, data god. When, Ken, Dean and I just did a show last night where I said this will happen.
Yeah.
And I almost fell out of my chair this morning, Dean. And Ken, I know we've talked about it, but these stolen election conspiracy theories are only going to increase. And when you're talking about polymarket, and this is to Ken's point, we're looking at not only some of the most transparent corruption. Now, think about this, the most transparent corruption we've ever seen on betting about the war based on insider knowledge and signal chats. We're also looking at Donald Trump setting up a 2026 midterm emergency where he can utilize the Insurrection Act, martial law, or the executive orders like 13848 to rationalize nationalizing the elections in specific swing districts. So now we have this downward effect. When I said there's a fine line between leaning forward and bending over, my fear is that everything we're doing in Iran is only domestically based or domestically targeted on the power structures that Donald Trump and MAGA want to keep in place. And it's that
Mm.
manipulation that I think that all of us need to fight against.
Yeah, great point, Dan. And last night, yeah, you were sort of prophetic, Nostra Denver is, because we went through these executive orders and these memorandums that started in 2018 about foreign interference, and what can you attach to these memorandums, and how can you bring foreign interference and introduce that as a narrative to do whatever the fuck you want. Pardon my French. I know a lot of people here don't like the filth flarn, but that is the fact. And we went over those things, and it was almost like we talked about this like wheel of foreign interference when it comes to Donald Trump trying to justify canceling 2026, re-engineering 2026, having poll watchers and ICE go to the polls in 2026, and even more to the presidential election in 2028. Yesterday at a rally, he's like, hey, who wants 4 more years? I mean, this is something that continues to prop up. And that little Truth Social that you talk about, that sent a charge down my spine. And you and I started texting this morning. I'm like, he's already doing it. What you said yesterday, Den and Ken, to that point, all of the things that we're seeing in some kind of foreign policy or war or skirmish or attack, they are all being transferred back into the justification of what Donald Trump wants to do to free and fair elections in the United States of America. And I think, in my mind, and I think in the minds of Americans, that's something that we need to start talking about a lot today, because, today we saw action. Today we saw a massive military campaign, a war started by Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, who are both in the same position in their own countries, both well underwater when it comes to approval, and both facing the long and hopefully very long and angry arm of the law. What better way to do it than to start a war and then to justify foreign interference in your elections, to ask for martial law or tell people in the United States of America, I have to do this because I'm protecting us? Ken, I would
Yeah.
love your thoughts. Yeah.
Donald Trump has no chance if it were just up to the American people to render their verdict. That first verdict is going to come in November. He is already doing everything he can to undermine the legitimacy of that vote, to make sure it's not a free and fair election. I
Mhm.
think we are going to see a blue tsunami in 2026 in November, but the next domino to fall, of course, is the presidency, and I do not believe this president is going to give it up lightly. And I think he is going to use every tool in his arsenal, including threats, national security threats, to try to manipulate that election. I mean, we've already seen the indications. We've already seen the raid of the Fulton County elections office to confiscate those votes as a pretext for claiming Chinese interference in our elections, a wild conspiracy theory that has been debunked again and again. We see the threats to deploy ICE around polling places. We see the threats to nationalize elections. They understand. They understand well and good that if it were up to the American people right now, much less in November or 3 years from now when things are gonna be even worse, if the American people are given the freedom to render their verdict, Donald Trump and MAGA and Trumpism is gonna be relegated to the trash heap of history. They do not want that verdict rendered, and so they are doing everything they can to undermine the ability of Americans to vote freely and fairly. And if you don't believe what they are actually saying, look at how they are behaving. The Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Justice, even now we are seeing the Department of Defense are acting as if there will never be accountability. They are doing blatantly illegal things. At uh, the latest reports from Reuters are that 4,400 illegal detentions have been carried out by DHS and ICE with absolutely no resolution to them, 89 violated court orders. And you only do those kinds of blatantly illegal things if you think your side is going to be in power forever and there will never be repercussions. That should be the ultimate warning flare that they don't intend to leave power. They're acting as if there never will be accountability.
Denver?
But I feel like Ken Harbaugh just gave me the diving board to jump into the predictive waters of 2026. Thank you, Ken Harbaugh. So
You're
that was beautiful because here's what I think is going to happen next. I'm going to give 3 scenarios after what I think is going to happen next. And Ken and Dean, I would love for you guys to say, oh my God. So number 1, I think, Ken, with the new executive orders they're writing, we're going to see a new national security presidential memorandum for national asset tasking. I think they're actually going to mobilize assets under DNI to investigate those that conspiratorially have been found guilty of manipulating the 2020 elections. I think that's going to happen. Once that happens, number 2, I think they're going to set the framework for specific swing districts, right, for that asset tasking. And I think they're going to use 3 specific baseline decision points. I hope you guys are ready for this. Number 1, China's influence on the 2020 election, which we know from Patrick Byrne, right, in his Deep Capture website, that Sidney Powell had written a draft EO after EO 13848, which was the Foreign Interference Executive Order, to generalize and to make the authorities of the president more sweeping, right, to declare a national emergency to nationalize elections. So they have to find these multiple areas of foreign interference. So it's going to be China, it's going to be Iran, and the third one is going to be the illegal voting of Mexicans, right, which gives it a foreign authority flavor. I think those are going to be the 3 main pillars of election interference that they could use. Now, again, this is predictive. I'm not saying it's 100%, and I don't want people to go, "Oh my God, Denver, it was just Iran." I'm just saying that this is what they did in the past. I'm just going in the past because what Ken said about the nationalization of elections, and when we're looking at Iran, as soon as he truthed that, again, it goes back to people need to look at the baseline reasons, and it's about Trump staying in power and enriching himself. If you just use those attributes and reasons, the answers are fairly easy. I'm not saying that, listen, guys, Dean, Ken, and I have been looking at this for so long now, but I think you should look at the domestic issues, what he's going to use to rationalize 2026 midterm dabbling or trying to remodel the election. And then the 45 days after 2026 election is going to be hell. The legal and bizarre things that happened 45 days after the midterm, after Ken said it, a blue tsunami. I'm thinking Ken, and I love Ken because Ken is so good at politics. And Dean, I think it's 40 to 45 seat swings. I think you're talking to Democrats flip 40 to 45 seats. I think that's how it's going to be. I think you're going to be a 25 to 30 seat majority in the House. That's my guess. But I just wanted to give you guys what I think the baseline reasons will be for Trump to do what he's going to do in the midterms.
So, what do you think the support for this war will be like in the United States, and not just the war, but the result of the war? Let's say they do or did take out the Khomeini. Competing reports that the Khomeini's toast and all the Tier One IGRC guys are finished, and the Iranian regime has been decapitated, etc. We've heard these stories before. And to Ken's earlier point, Denver, when you were working out your tech issues, I believe Iranian intelligence before I believe U.S. intelligence at this point. Same with everything that comes out of Netanyahu's war cabinet. So, we're told things, but I want to project out what you think this looks like after air superiority has been, because the United States has that, Israel has that now. But we're talking about, as Ken pointed out earlier with Malcolm and Steve on the Save America Movement Substack Live, which was great. Asymmetric warfare is not what the Americans do real well, Ken.
No, we don't. And I think it bears reminding people that we couldn't even affect regime change in Venezuela in our own backyard. The Maduro regime is still in power there. He might be in a jail in the US, but the Maduro regime is alive and well in Venezuela. Iran is a nation of 93 million people. You don't think they have people waiting in the wings to take over? I mean, the stakes for the IRGC, the stakes for the Khomeini regime are existential. They're not just going to buckle if their senior leadership is killed. They have people waiting to take that over. And I will say it again: you do not provoke regime change with bombs alone, unless you've got a game plan. And I do not trust this administration, the Trump administration, to have a game plan. That regime is going to remain intact in one way or another, and they are going to lash out violently, as they already have in a frankly a symmetric way at this point with ballistic missiles. But wait until they start deploying small boats or civilian looking craft against oil tankers, against oil rigs in the Arabian Gulf. Wait until they start waging the kind of asymmetric warfare that sent us packing from Vietnam to Afghanistan. We do not win typically those kinds of wars because of what it would take to win them. And you're right. We have air superiority. We're going to have air dominance very soon. We're going to spank the Iranian military. I feel fairly confident saying that. That's not is what's going to end this war. This is not a near peer adversary in any conventional sense. We're going to obliterate the Iranian military and just look at Afghanistan as a case in point, as an object lesson on how hubristic American air power has been in thinking that that alone can win a war. We left the country with our tail between our legs because of our lack of appreciation for the power of asymmetric warfare.
And Denver, you're a warheads on foreheads guy, right? I mean, this is what you used to do for a living, so you understand exactly what Ken's talking about. Anything to add to that? Because to Ken's greater point, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq. I mean,
Listen,
once you stop being flashy, it seems like America has a tough time with people going door to door.
air power is very effective at weakening the enemy's air defenses, preparing the land. It can be overwhelming. It can be shock and awe, as people have noticed. I've done it with B-1s, going to caves into Tora Bora and Mazar-e Sharif. But the issue is, sadly, Ken, as an Air Force guy, no, Ken, you're a Navy guy, he's correct, right? You've got to have troops on the ground, right, if we're actually going to affect that kind of change. Looking at Venezuela isn't even a near peer to Iran. And when you were asking the original question, Dean, and I think Ken really did cover it very well. I think there's sepsis, an infection in MAGA right now. I think the three things that Trump ran on, releasing the Epstein files, right, which has been a disaster. MAGA is QAnon infected, right? So I think a lot of them are looking sideways, like this guy is, he's in charge of a pedocracy right now. I think the second thing is the economy, the downstream effects of healthcare, Medicaid cuts, because red districts are so involved with that. And I think that's going to destroy. I think that's why the blue tsunami Ken talked about. But there's a third thing. MAGA is inherently nationalistic. And the fact that we're starting wars, And if there's any type of internal threat to the United States where something happens here, or you have those fast boats, as Ken talked about, hitting oil assets or American assets, or you have that asymmetric warfare being taken to our home front, things are going to get nasty. And I think those three separate things are why you're seeing the polling for Trump being low. And I never thought I would say this, but I do think, and Ken, and Dean, I'd love your take on this, to be honest. I do sense an infection in MAGA because he is actually going against his lies that were supposed to be truths to people who believed his lies. And now the fact that
Mm,
he's gone back on that, it's pretty interesting, right? That this is boomeranging on him because what he's doing is an end game. I think his health is bad, and I think what he's doing is making sure that his donors and everybody around him are taken care of before 2028. Because we can talk about a
mm.
third term, I think he would do it, but I also think he's got to think about the end game for his family. His health, we don't know what that is. My guess is isn't great. So I think there's a few things going on right here, but I do think there's some other actions we need to take into account, like does he even live through 2028? So again,
Yeah.
here's some of the things that I've been thinking about, guys.
Hey, listen, I don't think he gives a shit about his family though. So that
Well,
there's that variable
yeah.
to throw into it, right? Like if he's thinking about how do I leave a legacy for my family, this ain't a way to do it. And to your greater point, and Ken, if you could add to that as well in just a second, and we'll wrap this up. Stephen Miller, in terms of the peace president and trying to wrap this into an interesting narrative, Stephen Goebbels Miller says, "quote." This is this morning, about an hour and a half ago. To anyone still gullible enough to fall for scummy media hoaxes, Trump said warmongering neocons. Trump said warmongering neocons sending your kids to die for wars would never fight themselves. Liz Cheney is Kamala's top advisor. Liz wants to invade the whole Middle East. Kamala wants World War III. Trump wants peace, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
Ken.
Well, and this is the same president who in 2012 and 2013 repeatedly warned us that Obama was going to wage war with Iran to save his presidency. There's
Mhm.
always a tweet. There is always a
Mm,
tweet, and with Donald Trump, it is always projection. I don't think we can overemphasize the psychic element of this for Donald Trump. The idea that he has to exercise control, and this is all he has left, and Americans and Iranians are going to pay the price.
mm. Well, I appreciate that. Sorry, Denver, parting thoughts?
Yeah, I'm interested to see what happens in the next week if we continue what our ops tempo is, and I think people need to see what that ops tempo is. But I'm going to make a prediction.
Please. I
I'm going to
love
make
your
a prediction
predictions.
that in the next week or two, you're going to see an increase in voter fraud conspiracy theories on the 2020 and even the 2024 election, which he actually lumped that in there with Iran. I
Mhm.
also think you're going to see an increase in rhetoric. And I know this is literally insane. I think with him coming out for Clinton's testimony, and by the way, guys, I just want to let you know Clinton wasn't exactly honest about Monica Lewinsky, but I think you're going to see a new, I think, heightened increase of anti-Epstein posts and people saying that Clinton actually exonerated Trump. I think they're trying to tamp down the Epstein stuff. They're trying to increase the conspiracy stuff, and I think you're going to see that in the next week or two. And I think with Iran, I think you're going to see some really interesting things about negotiations that are happening because I still think that there are a couple smart people left that don't think we can take Iran. So I'm wondering what's going to happen in a week or two about negotiations with Iran, and I think it's going to be interesting. So anyway, I just want
Mm.
that's usually that's what I'm that's my analysis.
No, I appreciate it. Guys, listen, I love having you both on. You're both decorated military veterans. You're both patriots. You both have a very deep understanding at an operational level, and you both have values and virtues that dictate that what's going on here is wag the dog. I mean,
It is.
we're watching it happen, and you can say what you want about the Iranian regime. No love lost for them. I side with Canada's statement, which was carefully worded by Mark Carney today, saying, we want the best for the Iranian people. We want no bloodshed. The Iranian people should decide, how their government works. And the Iranian regime that has been in power has not allowed them to do that for some time. So there is some support for regime change there. But, these regime changers, Netanyahu and Trump, they're not liberators. They're not doing this to liberate people. They're not doing this for democracy's sake. So I think everybody needs to keep all of these things on their sort of bingo card of what the fuck is going on and why it's happening and how it relates back to canceling free and fair elections in the United States and keeping a strong man in power. Thank you both for doing this. Really appreciate it. I don't mean to commandeer you on a Saturday morning. I know Denver is probably going to have some turkey bacon, and Ken needs to get a bite to eat, so we got to let you go. But everybody, please hit that chyron at the top. Please follow Mr. Denver Riggleman. Please follow Mr. Ken Harbaugh. No, it's because you got alpha gal. I just want to make sure
know,
you
it's
eat
so
some turkey
good.
bacon.
Turkey bacon.
But I want to thank everybody. Follow these gentlemen specifically. They'll have a lot to say about it, and they have very deep understanding and connections and access to information not many people do. So the Ken Harbaugh Show, Denver Riggleman III. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Dean. Good to see you.
Thanks, brother.
Take care. Bye-bye.